Good evening, everyone. This is Anna here. Thank you, all of you, for being here today. And thanks to Moini and Satish for encouraging me to delve into this amazing novel, The Dark Labyrinth by Lawrence Darrell. We have the New York Times quotation here, quite simply a lovely work of art. In order to make this presentation, I had to read the book again and again and again because it is so layered, so many underpinnings, it cannot be digested in one reading. And so I have begged to differ with the New York Times. The word simply just doesn't fit in with this book at all. And actually, neither does the word lovely. But a work of art, yes, it certainly is. So, Lawrence Darrell was born in Jalandhar, India, and at 11 was sent to England for his studies. But he wasn't a good student, he wasn't even an interested student, and never did make it to university. He started writing, and his father died in India, and mother came back to England, and she took the Lawrence and the rest of the family to the Greek island of Corfu, where three of them wrote some very well respected works of literature. So let me just give a quick summary of yes, let me also tell you that Lawrence Darrell was supposed to have had uh, many mental health issues. Mental health at that time, in the early half of the 20th century, was a very nascent uh, a very nascent science with Freud and Jung just coming out with their uh, uh, philosophies and ideas and constructs. But Lawrence refused to take any kind of medication for to deal with his issues uh, because he felt that it would interfere with his creativity. So the basic summary of the story is that there's this group of tourists. They've come ashore on Crete and they have been enticed to take this little expedition into uh, this legendary labyrinth of the Minotaur. And the crew includes a painter, a spiritualist, a missionary with a beloved fox terrier, a soldier, a convalescent, and eccentric couple. So they are all holidaying and they're seeking respite from a broken post war world because this is written in 1947, just after the Second World War. It is set in the glorious Mediterranean landscapes which Lawrence Durrell so famously evoked in his travel writing and novels. The Dark Labyrinth is a morality tale unlike any other, artfully blending horror and humor, comedy and tragedy, witty allegory and profound philosophy. It is a sublime novel, as refreshing today as it was decades ago. So let's just do a quick run through the Greek mythology, uh, which is the kind of foundation of this book. We have the Minotaur in Greek mythology, half bull, half man, right? Though this picture is not showing, just in the mythology, it's the head of a bull, the rest of him is man. So the king of Crete, Minos, uh, he had been sent the snow white bull by Poseidon. Now, Poseidon is the king of the seas, and of course, Crete being an island, very important god here. So Minos made the mistake. He did not sacrifice the bull, he kept the bull. And this angered Poseidon. So, as punishment, he made Minos' wife Pasiphae fall in love with the bull. And as a result, she bore a child. And that child was half bull and half man. And now Minos had to hide this creature. So he got Daedalus to make a labyrinth in which the Minos was kept, the Minotaur was kept. Now, let's just go into Daedalus. Daedalus had killed his nephew by throwing him down from the Acropolis, and he had been banished to the island of Crete. In Crete, what happened now in Crete was, okay, had been banished to the island of Crete. The king of Crete, Minos, right, who had this Minotaur, right, got him to make the labyrinth so that he could keep the Minotaur out of sight and out of mind. But now what happens is King Minos' son, Androgeus, was killed by the Athenians. So Minos says that as punishment, the Athenians have to send 14 young people to be sacrificed to the Minotaur every 9 years. The third time round, Theseus decides enough is enough. I'm going along as a sacrifice and I will defeat this Minotaur once and for all. Ariadne, Minos' daughter, helps Theseus. He manages to kill the Minotaur and he escapes with Ariadne. But he would never have found his way out of the labyrinth except that Daedalus gave him the idea of tying a string as he goes through the labyrinth. And then he could use that string to find his way back out, as did later Hansel and Gretel and etc. As punishment, Minos then kept Daedalus on a part of the island from which there was no escape because it was a 300-foot cliff and there was only the sea below. There was no other way of escaping. Now, Daedalus, of course, being an inventor, makes these wings which are attached to his body and Icarus's body with wax. But Icarus, being young and full of himself, flies too close to the sun and the wax melts and Icarus falls into the sea. Daedalus escapes to Sicily. This is thought to be the labyrinth, but it's all mythology, so there's no historical evidence for any of it. All right, so now we get down to the book, the characters. There's one thing that binds them all together, though they are so diverse, that they all share a certain psychological unease. Something is bothering all of them. And that leads them to undertake this journey. So there is Lord Grayson. He's a poet and a cricketer, of course. And he scored very high at Lord's or some other hallowed stadium. As a poet, he describes himself as neither exciting nor experimental, but he has been published. Not self-published, but published. As a person, he considers himself rather unsatisfactory, neither damned nor exalted. He is on the ship. He is attracted to this very pretty, weak, helpless-looking young lady, but she's a lower-class Cockney passenger who's come onto the ship for reasons which we'll discuss in a minute. He has now been diagnosed with a terminal illness, and this is bothering him a lot. When his friend Axelos, who had been with him in college, invites him to check out the city of rock, which he claims to have discovered, and a temple within in the labyrinth in Cephalo. Cephalo is, of course, Lawrence Durrell's imaginary island. Uh, Grayson decides to accept because there's this terminal illness, for one. Two is he doesn't want to put, he's working for the British Museum in the Greek section, and he doesn't want to put Axelos' offer up to the authorities because he knows that Axelos is a huge scamster. So he'd rather go and check it out himself. Now, then there's John Byrd. There's John Bird. He's an author, an artist, and a soldier. He came from a very genteel background. His mother died when he was very young. He was brought up by his father. But and he goes on to Slade to study art. He falls in love with an artist there, and then they have a very complex marriage and an even more complicated divorce. And after his divorce, he starts to drift around the Mediterranean. And when the war starts, he decides to sign up and is, because of all the languages he knows and his in-depth knowledge of the Middle East, the British use him as an intelligence officer, send him to Crete to lead a guerrilla unit that is making these lightning kind of raids on the Germans who have conquered Greece. Now, while he is there, certain events lead him to eventually killing a German soldier in cold blood. And when he gets back after the war to England, he is constantly disturbed by recurring nightmares. And then he goes to a psychologist who was also in college with Axelos, Grayson, and this psychologist is psychoanalyst, is Hogarth, his name is. He advises Bird to go back to Greece and try and find the body of this German soldier and give that soldier a Christian burial. That would probably solve the problem. Now, at the same time, the British have heard rumors, this is now we are talking 1947 or so, a little earlier, probably earlier, that the Jews in Palestine are sending arms to Greece to help with the overthrow of the British monarchy and the Greek monarchy, and the British always support monarchy. So they want to check this out. So they ask him to go. They ask Bird to go to check it out. So he gets onto the ship, the Europa, where all the other passengers are. And on the morning of when everything happens, has a sort of, he's troubled by what he calls an obscure excitement. He cannot understand why. There's Campion, who's the artist, cynic and pessimist. He's not from British nobility, but he is an acclaimed artist, and so he's always invited to the homes of nobility and high-class Britishers, and he does nothing but make fun of them and is always critical about them and everything to do with them. Now he boards the ship at Marseilles because he's a sort of guy who can't stick at anything, and he keeps getting involved with women and then leaving them. And here he's now leaving a woman, not because he's fallen in love with her, out of love with, he just can't stay in one place, ADHD or something like that, and he moves, right? And he gets onto the ship because the ship is half empty. So he gets a cabin by just convincing somebody in the office in France. And So his name is not on the passenger list. That causes a bit of confusion in the story. He's constantly attacking British society, and on the ship, he is vaguely disturbed by a sense of an imminent disaster. He's a real character and he always has something to say, something that is offensive or something comic. Then there's Fear Max. Fear Max is a very complex story. He was an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, an epileptic who needed a lot of care but never really got it. At 13, he was apprenticed to a bookshop owner who was very kind to him, and there he started reading. He started reading for pleasure, and soon it became a sort of hunger within him. And he just kept reading and reading and reading. And he was in search, in his own words, of something which would bridge the gap between the universe of life and matter and the small circumscribed universe of the world that he lived in. Now, at 38, he discovers that he has a gift of automatic writing, and then he becomes a medium and starts giving seances, and he starts to receive messages from the French Marie. And she gives him such accurate predictions that he becomes very famous. And of course, there are the rationalists who are always trying to expose him. But French Marie is very protective of him, and nothing happens. And he is kind of falls in love with this French Marie, who's just a kind of ghost. On the ship, he has this premonition that as long as he's on the ship, he's safe, but there's something bad going to happen on land. Uh, Once the French Marie vanishes, he doesn't know why, uh, he suddenly loses his ability to conduct seances or to be a medium. And he and his friend, then one of his friends, they start faking it. And then all these rationalists who are out to get him catch him, and he's exposed as a fraud. But this makes no difference to his following. He serves some time in jail, but he still has a huge discipleship, which he finds horrible. He writes a lot about uh, the human mind and psychic experiences. And currently, he's writing on a treatise on the psychic mind and the psychic mind and the predisposition to epilepsy and schizophrenia. Now, when he's talking about the discipleship which he claims, which he says he finds horrible, he's talking to Campion, and they're talking about Campion also has this huge following, which he's not so thrilled about. So he's explaining to Campion's reason for not being happy with his discipleship. He says, me, the original me, the suffering me, is prevented from growing by the dead weight of discipleship. And when Campion asks him, then why don't you just chuck the whole thing? He says, he quotes Martin Luther, not Luther King, but Martin Luther. Here I stand, I can do no other. Then there's this sort of comic relief, Elsie and John Truman. He's very warm and friendly, popular, plays the piano, teases the missionary who's on board by keeping on playing a martyr to chastity. Uh, she is very beautiful, not much more said about her. And they are on the ship because they won some competition, which as a prize they could either get £1 a month or something for the rest of their life, or go on this cruise. They decide to go on the cruise. Then there is Miss Dombey. She spent her childhood with a missionary father in China, comes from the same village as Bird, and her father's death left a huge gaping hole in her life and led her down this path to uh, becoming a missionary. And she's super filled with missionary zeal. And now she boards the ship because she wants to go to Egypt to prepare the infidel for the second coming. She's consumed with the second coming. And Campion keeps teasing her about it. Then there's Virginia Dale. She comes from the poorer sections of London. Her fiance has died was killed in a plane crash. And for some time, she was completely overwhelmed by grief. But she realizes that she has to rise up above it, and she decides to complete her education and maybe get herself a decent job and rise out of uh, the suburbs of London where she's grown up. Okay, and she's a Cockney. Now, here comes the storyline. Uh, this is what I think Hogarth said about some of the characters. Each was lost in the labyrinth of their own spiritual discoveries. So here's the storyline. These guys, this little group of people, they have been warned not to go in by the British Council had come aboard the ship, tell them not to go, it's not safe. The rocks are not stable there within the labyrinth. But they want to be brave, they want to show that they can defy this British Council, their own council, that is. And they enter with this tourist guide. They are so excited. They're waiting to see the city of rock, but that's deep within. And the entrance to the labyrinth is so narrow and uninviting that they begin to have doubts. Should they go and shouldn't they go? But they once again decide to be brave and move on. Have all sorts of scary experiences with underground streams and even an underground river. They encounter bats and a scorpion. And while crossing the river, they hear this long drawn, muffled roar that rose above the noise of the stream and echoed through the galleries that surrounded them. And of course, they immediately uh, trying to put their fears at rest by trying to give scientific reasons for why this noise might be coming. You know, could it be a bear? Could it be water falling? Could it be, you know, uh, various other options that they start to discuss. Now they keep going, egged on by the guard and a few of the others, and then they come into this, what they say, describe as like a cathedral. It's this huge cave flooded with light, and uh, they're absolutely fascinated by it. And there's one last tunnel, and the guide says, like, you come down this tunnel, you'll see the temple and the inscriptions which Axelos has discovered. They didn't want to go. They actually had enough, but the guide tells them, like, you can't miss out on this. And Grayson wants to see it because he wants to know whether is this real or has Axelos faked it. Part holograph and part character. So they see the holograph, and they're coming back. And suddenly, this large partridge flies out of the dark and out of the cave roof from where this light is coming. And this excites the guide. And he wants to look for the nest of this partridge. And he starts to climb all these ledges, searching for the nest. And higher he goes. And these tourists are like, chill, man, if you fall and break your leg, how are we going to get out of here, kind of thing. And but the guide is so excited, and he finds the egg and climbs out onto a projecting rock to show them his eggs. And he's jumping on this rock, and boom, that's the end of it. The the walls of all the tunnels start to collapse and crash around them. Now, Grayson had gone a little apart to inspect something. So he sees all this. He sees it happening. He sees the labyrinth walls collapse, and all his fellow tourists are on the other side of this wall. He can't hear them, he can't see them. He's shouting, he's calling, nothing. He doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He thinks the best thing then is to try and get out and get help. And he somehow or the other blunders out of the labyrinth. He doesn't know how. It's later on called a miraculous escape. And he finds himself very close to his friend's house, and where he goes to raise the alarm. Now, there's Miss Dombey. She, on the other hand, is in total darkness. She can't hear anyone. She's shouting. Nobody's answering her. She feels around and she feels fear max. She knows it's fear max for whatever reason. And she feels this warm liquid around her. And she thinks like he's dead. This is blood. And she's terrified and she starts to kind of run away from there, stumble around in the dark. And then suddenly, halfway, like as she stumbled along some way, she remembers she has matches in her pocket. And in a hysteria, she's not thinking. She just starts striking the matches one after the other, hoping to get out. But of course, she's in a labyrinth. She's no idea whether she's going in circles or going in or out. And then the matches get over. And she is completely in despair. And the only thing she can think of is hiding from it. So she has these sleeping pills which have been prescribed to her, and she decides to just pop them all rather than deal with the terror that has overtaken her. She pops all the sleeping pills and lies down, and then she starts to have doubts about her beliefs in the second coming. She doubts everything that she believes, and then gets transported in her uh, uh, drugged state to her time with her father, and she dies dreaming that she's in her father's lap. Of course, she dies of the sleeping pill. Uh, Fearmax, in the meantime, wakes up. He just had a concussion and fallen into a little pool of water, which Miss Dombey thought was blood. And by the light of his torch, he sees these footsteps, and he doesn't know who it could possibly be. And he thinks that his lost French Marie had come to see him, and he has to find her. And he, of course, his logical brain is very much at work. He sits down, eats his lunch, which he finds in his pocket, finds his torch, and decides to find his way out. He lights a cigar, and then he realizes that the smoke is escaping somewhere, and he must follow the smoke. And so he keeps doing that. He keeps following whichever tunnel the smoke is going down. And then he suddenly gets a feel that he's close to the French Marie. But the French Marie, he thinks, is pointing him into another tunnel, not the one where the smoke is going down. And he allows his love and his longing for the French Marie to conquer his reason, and he goes down the tunnel where he hopes to meet the French Marie. And he goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and then he starts to hear the roar, which this one also heard, which actually is what terrified her into taking the pills. I think I forgot to say it, Miss Dombey. And he hears the roar, and he sits down to think about what he's doing and what he's done, and about the French Marie. And he suddenly finds that his torch is dimmed so much that he can't see. And he knows that it's not the batteries, it's something else. And then he gets a smell of, he can't identify it at first. And then he suddenly remembers this. He had seen, I think, a seagull's nest or something. And it's the smell of decaying carrion. And he's thinking about this, that there is something that is eating carrion. This is the nest of that person. And he's thinking about it and the whole philosophy of his life. And then he sees this two red eyes coming towards him. And the last we hear is that uh, he feels himself in the jaws of this creature. Now we have Campion, Virginia, and Spot. Now Virginia actually gets, and Campion, they get blown down a corridor into a space that's flooded with light. Now Virginia is unconscious at first, but Campion carries her until they are out onto the top of a cliff, top of a 300-foot cliff. They have no way of climbing down. And then they have many discussions. And Virginia says, like, the only thing we have to do is jump. And then suddenly, Spot, Miss Dombey's dog, appears terrified, and Virginia is kind of so relieved to have somebody other than Campion to talk to that she cuddles the dog and calms the dog down and, gives the dog some of her lunch and is with the dog. And Campion suddenly gets the idea and he grabs the dog and he's going to throw this dog down to see if the dog can survive. Then only would he consider jumping. Virginia fights with him and tries to stop him. The dog even bites him, but Campion wins and chucks the dog down. But they wait and eventually they see that a small speck kind of swimming towards the shore. So the dog survived the jump. So they decide that the next morning they both are going to jump because they want to arrive on land when it's daytime. The dog will be on land at night time. So the next morning they jump, but Virginia can't be 100% sure that Campion jumped. They were holding hands, but she doesn't know. And Virginia, she survives the fall with a broken leg, gets taken to one of the monasteries for treatment, and will be sent to wherever, back to Britain or whatever, to recuperate. Boats are looking for Campion, but nobody really knows whether he did jump or not. So then that leaves now the Trumans. The Trumans found themselves in this strange place, and they are John especially, is so happy that, okay, we've escaped the labyrinth. And now we only have to get down because they are at a great height, and all around them is just very super steep mountainsides. And at the bottom of it, way below, maybe higher than the 300-foot cliff, there are these forests. And John is sure they'll find a way down. He's looking, he can't find it. And then they meet this lady, Ruth Adams. Now, Ruth tells them that she had been lost from the labyrinth along with her husband and his friend. And they had landed up here. And they searched and they searched. They tried everything and they couldn't find a way down. So her husband and his friend decided to go back in the labyrinth to try and find a way out. But they never returned. So Ruth has been living all these years on her own over here. John refuses to accept it, hysterically searching for a way out. But his wife, Elise, she accepts it. And they live there. And eventually, John also realizes that there is no escape. And it ends off with him climbing into his wife's bed and clinging on to her, and her thinking that everything exists in the mind and nothing else. That's the end of the labyrinth part of the story. And now it ends back at Axelos's house where Bird has arrived after hearing about this. And Gresson is there and Axelos. And a shepherd boy comes and brought by the police, and he admits that the tourist agency paid him to blow a ram's horn from the other side of the labyrinth into the labyrinth, and that would make the sound that the tourists would be scared and think it's a miracle. Axelos then claims that he faked the whole city of rock. But one of the monks from the monastery says that he and Axelos discovered the city of rock together, and Axelos had paid him to never reveal the secret. So he doesn't reveal it except to God, nobody else. Right? So, what is what now? What is reality? Uh, what is the imagination? What is uh, the fake, the fraud being played out? This is where the book leaves us. We can choose where we want to take it. And Feomax, soon before he meets up with his red eyes, uh, says that to deal with evidence that cannot be reconciled to the body and canons of everyday science has been the task of independent minds since the beginning of history. So, what is spirituality? What is mysticism? What is superstition? What is the psychic experience? These are things that Feomax is trying to understand, right? And he says madness, therefore, must be a conditional term. It's how we view it. We may think a person is mad, or like they may have thought Joan of Arc was a witch because she said that she had voices telling her what to do. But was she mad, or did she really hear the voices? Similarly, and now Feomax doesn't bring up Joan of Arc. I brought it up. Madness, he says, is a conditional term. All right, so that's where we end with the book and the story and the thoughts that we are left with. There was a little passage which I can't now find in the book where it's Feomax or its Campion says that all of us are seeking our own death. We are spinning our own cocoons, which will take us to our next experience, as just as a caterpillar metamorphizes, spins its own cocoon and metamorphosizes into a butterfly. Somewhere in the book, which I can't find that passage now, this is how they describe the experience of death and the afterlife, which, of course, even in Greek philosophy, there is similar stuff. And there are many religions also have uh, dwelt on the afterlife and the possibilities that could come from it. Uh, but anyway, the book ends with us having to deal with that on our own. Uh, Now, this book, let's get back to just the literary aspects of it. The observer said it is superb, not only in the great passages of poetical description, but also casual wit and brilliance of comment. So we just look at them. Here's some of his brilliance of comment. This is about the war. A million imbeciles blowing each other's arms and legs are off with incredible gallantry and decorating each other with whatever members they have left. If my choice was to lie between having my brains blown out and having them permanently awash with the dirty bilge of political work, I would rather choose the former. This is about the War Office, the politics of war, and actually being on the field. Now, here he's talking about the British colonists. The granite bound idiocy and moral superiority. I think many Indians will identify with this immediately. The planetary atmosphere of self satisfaction each of them carries around to look at himself through. It is staggering. The sense of ritual they had evolved to cover their disastrous negation, their impotence. So I think many people will understand who have uh, been at the periphery, since I think all of us are in a generation that could only be at the periphery of uh, colonialism. But yes, we can all identify with this. His poetical descriptions here, he's talking about bird, who after his divorce is just wandering aimlessly around the Mediterranean, and here how it is described, gradually emptying his ambitions one by one into the slow wake of a life which, curiously enough, seemed only now to be beginning. Then here is describing the Mediterranean. The wind was kicking up a sparkling sea. A sunset, the sun was falling, dense with its own golden weight towards the sea. Its houses, with their child's paint box colors, glowing pristine and ingenuous in the waning sunlight. So, yeah, these are poetical descriptions which are not exactly lovely. Here's this casual wit now. The how bravely we are suffering school, talking about all the Britishers who've gone to war. One can only hope that the whole lot of them meet in the obituary columns of the Times. Rather nasty, but quite funny nevertheless. I think that it is only in the South that they warm themselves at life instead of transforming it into bad literature. Uh, at that time, many of the Britishers, even the French, Germans in the northern part of uh, Europe were attracted to the lifestyles of the southern part of Europe. So, yeah, that brings us to the end of the my presentation, and yeah, I'll hand over to Mohini to decide what we do next. Uh, Thank you so much.